My name is Margaret. I am 75 years old. I have lived through wars, raised 4 sons, and buried my parents. But nothing prepared me for the day I discovered the truth about my family. It was a Tuesday in March when my world collapsed. 3 phone calls. 3 daughters-in-law. 3 pregnancies announced on the same day. At first, I thought it was a miracle. A blessing from above. 3 grandchildren coming into our lives at once. But miracles, I learned, can hide the darkest secrets. My husband Robert sat in his favorite chair that evening. The same chair he had occupied for 30 years. He was reading his newspaper like nothing had changed. Like our family hadn't just been turned upside down. I watched him carefully. His hands were steady. His breathing was normal. But something felt wrong. The timing was too perfect. Too calculated. 3 women who barely spoke to each other. 3 pregnancies announced within hours of each other. 3 secrets that would destroy everything I believed about my family. I should have asked questions that night. I should have demanded answers. Instead, I made dinner and pretended everything was normal. I set the table for 2. I served his favorite meal. I smiled and congratulated him on becoming a grandfather 3 times over. But inside something was breaking. A small crack in my heart that would soon become a chasm. The next morning I found myself staring at old family photos. Pictures of holidays, birthdays, celebrations. Robert stood in every single one. Always smiling. Always the center of attention. Always surrounded by my daughters-in-law. They looked at him with such admiration. Such devotion. I had mistaken their looks for respect. For the natural affection daughters-in-law should have for their husband's father. I was so naive. So trusting. So blind to what was happening right under my nose. That was 3 months ago. 3 months since my life changed forever. 3 months since I learned the truth about the man I had shared my bed with for 47 years. Today I am sitting in my empty house. My sons won't speak to me. My daughters-in-law avoid me completely. The neighbors whisper when I walk past. The whole town knows what happened. Everyone except me had suspected the truth. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. Let me tell you about the life I thought I had. The family I thought I knew. The husband I thought I could trust. Because sometimes the people closest to us are the ones hiding the biggest secrets. I met Robert when I was 22 years old. He was 25, working at the local bank, and the most charming man I had ever encountered. He had this way of making everyone feel special. When he walked into a room, people noticed. When he spoke, people listened. Our wedding was the social event of the season. Everyone said we were the perfect couple. Robert with his dark hair and easy smile. Me with my blonde curls and Sunday dress. We looked like we belonged in a magazine. We looked like happiness itself. We bought our first house 6 months after the wedding. A small 2-bedroom place on Elm Street. Robert painted every room himself. I planted flowers in the front yard. We were building something beautiful together. Something that would last forever. Our first son David was born 2 years later. Then came Michael, then James, then finally Thomas. 4 boys in 8 years. The house was never quiet. Never empty. Always filled with laughter and chaos and the sound of growing children. Robert was a wonderful father in those early years. He taught the boys how to throw a baseball. How to ride bicycles. How to be gentlemen. He worked long hours at the bank, but he always came home for dinner. Always helped with homework. Always tucked them in at night. I was the perfect housewife. I cooked 3 meals a day. I kept the house spotless. I ironed Robert's shirts every Sunday night. I organized birthday parties and school events. I made sure everyone had what they needed before I thought about what I wanted. The boys grew up fast. Too fast. Before I knew it, they were graduating high school, going to college, finding jobs, meeting girls. One by one, they brought young women home to meet us. One by one, they announced their engagements. David married Sarah when he was 24. She was a sweet girl from the next town over. Quiet and polite and eager to please. She called me mother from the very first day. She helped me in the kitchen during family dinners. She asked for advice about cooking and cleaning and being a good wife. Michael married Lisa 2 years later. Lisa was different from Sarah. More confident. More independent. She had her own opinions about everything. She worked as a nurse at the hospital. She wore pants instead of dresses. She spoke her mind even when nobody asked. James married Rebecca last year. Rebecca was the youngest of the 3. Only 23 when she joined our family. She was beautiful in a way that made people stop and stare. Long dark hair, green eyes, a smile that could light up a room. She reminded me of myself at that age. All three girls were different, but they had one thing in common. They all adored Robert. They hung on his every word during family gatherings. They laughed at his jokes even when they weren't funny. They asked his advice about everything from career choices to home decorating. I thought it was wonderful. I was proud that my husband had such a good relationship with his daughters-in-law. I bragged to my friends about how well everyone got along. How lucky I was to have such a close-knit family. Sunday dinners were our tradition. Every week without fail. The whole family would gather around our dining room table. I would cook for hours. Roast beef and mashed potatoes and fresh vegetables from my garden. The boys would talk about work and sports. The girls would help me serve and clean up afterward. Robert would sit at the head of the table. The patriarch of our little dynasty. He would tell stories about his childhood. He would share wisdom about marriage and life and raising children. Everyone listened with such respect. Such attention. I felt so blessed during those dinners. So grateful for the family we had built together. So secure in the knowledge that we would all be connected forever. Through good times and bad. Through sickness and health. Through whatever life might throw our way. But I was living in a fantasy. A beautiful, perfect fantasy that was about to come crashing down around me. The first sign something was wrong came during Christmas dinner last year. I was in the kitchen preparing dessert when I heard Robert laughing with the girls in the living room. Nothing unusual about that. He always entertained them while I finished cooking. But this time something felt different. The laughter was too intimate. Too private. Like they were sharing secrets that didn't include me. When I walked into the room with the pie, they all went quiet. Too quiet. Like children caught misbehaving. I brushed it off at the time. Told myself I was being silly. Being jealous of my own daughters-in-law. But the feeling stayed with me. A small, uncomfortable weight in my stomach that wouldn't go away. Then there were the phone calls. Robert had always been social, but suddenly he was getting calls every evening. Long conversations behind closed doors. When I asked who was calling, he would give vague answers. Old friends. Nothing important. But I could hear him through the bedroom wall. His voice was different during those calls. Softer. More intimate. Like he was talking to someone special. Someone who mattered to him in a way I couldn't understand. One evening, I picked up the extension to make my own call. I heard Rebecca's voice on the other end. She was crying. Telling Robert about problems with James. About how her husband didn't understand her. About how lonely she felt. Robert was comforting her. Telling her she was beautiful and special and deserving of better treatment. His voice was gentle. Caring. The way he used to talk to me when we were young and in love. I hung up quickly. Quietly. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. But I told myself it was innocent. Fatherly concern. Nothing more than that. The visit started shortly after. Sarah would stop by on Tuesday afternoons while David was at work. She would bring fresh bread or vegetables from her garden. She would stay for coffee and conversation. Always leaving before I got home from my weekly grocery shopping. Lisa would come on Thursdays. She would say she needed Robert's advice about some financial matter. They would sit in his study for hours. The door would be closed. I could hear their voices but not their words. When she left, her cheeks would be flushed. Her eyes would be bright. Rebecca came on Saturdays. She would arrive just after lunch, claiming she wanted to learn how to use Robert's workshop tools. She said James wasn't handy around the house. She wanted to surprise him by fixing things herself. Robert was always eager to teach her. I started paying closer attention. Watching more carefully. The girls never visited when my sons were around. They never came on Sundays when the whole family was together. They only wanted to see Robert when he was alone. When I wasn't paying attention. But I still trusted my husband. Still believed in the man I had married 46 years earlier. Still thought there was an innocent explanation for everything I was seeing. The gifts were harder to ignore. Expensive gifts that appeared in our house without explanation. A silk scarf draped over Robert's dresser. A bottle of cologne that smelled different from his usual brand. A book of poetry with an inscription I wasn't allowed to read. When I asked about these things, Robert would smile and change the subject. He would kiss my forehead and tell me not to worry about such trivial matters. He would distract me with plans for our next vacation or suggestions for redecorating the living room. I wanted to believe him. Needed to believe him. My whole identity was built around being Robert's wife. Mother to his children. Matriarch of his family. Without that, who was I? What was my purpose? So I pushed down my doubts. Buried my suspicions. Convinced myself I was imagining problems that didn't exist. That my 74-year-old mind was playing tricks on me. That 46 years of marriage had made me paranoid and foolish. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I knew something was terribly wrong. I knew my husband was keeping secrets. I knew my daughters-in-law were involved. I knew my perfect family was built on lies. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. Wasn't ready to face the truth that would destroy everything I held dear. The first call came at 8:30 in the morning on March 15th. I was washing breakfast dishes when the phone rang. Sarah's voice was trembling with excitement. He could barely get the words out. She was pregnant. 6 weeks along. She and David were over the moon. They had been trying for 2 years. They had almost given up hope. Now their dreams were finally coming true. I dropped the plate I was holding. It shattered on the kitchen floor, but I barely noticed. I was too busy crying tears of joy. Screaming with happiness. Dancing around broken pieces of ceramic. My first grandchild. After all these years of waiting. After all the hints I had dropped about wanting to be a grandmother. Finally it was happening. I called Robert at work immediately. He sounded pleased but not surprised. Almost like he had been expecting the news. When I asked if Sarah had mentioned anything to him, he said no. Just a lucky guess, he claimed. The second call came that afternoon. Lisa this time. He sounded different from Sarah. More nervous. Less certain. But the news was the same. He was pregnant too. 7 weeks along. She hadn't even told Michael yet. I was the first to know. My hands started shaking as I wrote down the details. 2 pregnancies. 2 grandchildren on the way. Felt too good to be true. Too much happiness all at once. But a small voice in my head whispered that something was wrong. The timing was too convenient. Too perfect. 2 daughters-in-law pregnant at almost exactly the same time after years of no announcements. I pushed the voice away. Focused on the joy instead. Started making lists of things I needed to buy. Cribs and high chairs and tiny clothes. I was going to spoil these babies rotten. The third call came that evening. Rebecca was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. At first I thought something terrible had happened. That James had been hurt. That there was some emergency I needed to know about. But then she managed to get the words out. He was pregnant too. 8 weeks along. He was scared. Confused. Not sure how to tell James. Not sure if he would be happy or angry or disappointed. I sat down heavily in Robert's chair. 3 pregnancies. 3 daughters-in-law. All announced on the same day. All roughly 8 weeks along. The coincidence was staggering. When Robert came home that night, I was waiting for him with dinner and champagne. I told him about all 3 calls. About our incredible luck. About how blessed our family was going to be. He smiled and nodded and made all the right sounds. But his eyes looked strange. Guilty almost. Like he knew something I didn't know. Something he wasn't ready to share. Over the next few days I threw myself into planning mode. I researched cribs and car seats and baby clothes. I started knitting blankets and booties. I cleared out the spare bedroom to make a nursery for when the grandchildren visited. But questions kept nagging at me. Why hadn't any of the girls mentioned they were trying to get pregnant? Why hadn't my sons said anything about wanting children? Why were all 3 pregnancies so similar in timing? I started doing math in my head. 8 weeks ago was the middle of January. 7 weeks ago was the 3rd week of January. 6 weeks ago was the end of January. All 3 pregnancies had started within 2 weeks of each other. What were the odds of that happening naturally? What were the chances that 3 women in the same family would conceive within such a narrow window of time? I called my sister Helen to share the news. She had raised 6 children of her own. She understood the joy of becoming a grandmother. But when I told her about the timing, she went quiet. After a long pause, she asked if I thought it was strange. 3 pregnancies announced on the same day. 3 women who rarely spoke to each other outside of family gatherings. 3 babies due within weeks of each other. I hung up feeling more confused than ever. Helen's questions echoed my own doubts. Made my suspicions seem more reasonable. More justified. That night I watched Robert more carefully. The way he smiled when I talked about the babies. The way he avoided eye contact when I mentioned the timing. The way he changed the subject when I wondered aloud about such an amazing coincidence. He was hiding something. I was certain of it now. But what? And why? What could possibly be worth lying to me about 3 grandchildren on the way? I decided to call each of the girls individually, to congratulate them properly, to offer my help and support, to ask more detailed questions about their pregnancies and their plans. But when I tried to reach them, none of them answered their phones. Sarah's went straight to voicemail. Lisa claimed to be too busy to talk. Rebecca said she was feeling sick and needed to rest. For the first time in 46 years of marriage, I began to suspect my husband was keeping secrets from me. Big secrets. Life-changing secrets. Secrets that involved my daughters-in-law and 3 unborn babies. I just had no idea how devastating those secrets would turn out to be. The discovery happened by accident. Pure chance. If I hadn't forgotten my reading glasses at home that Wednesday morning, I never would have come back early from my book club meeting. I never would have seen what I wasn't supposed to see. I walked into my house quietly, not wanting to disturb Robert if he was napping. The living room was empty. His chair was vacant. I assumed he was in the garden or taking a walk around the neighborhood. Then I heard voices coming from his study. 2 voices. Robert's deep familiar tone and a woman's higher pitch. They were speaking softly, but I could make out individual words if I listened carefully. I crept closer to the door. It was slightly ajar. Through the crack I could see Rebecca sitting on the small couch. Robert was kneeling beside her. His hand was resting on her still flat stomach. His face was filled with an expression I had never seen before. Pure tenderness. Complete devotion. The look of a man deeply in love. Rebecca was crying softly. Happy tears, not sad ones. Robert was whispering to her about how beautiful she was. How proud he was. How everything was going to work out perfectly. Then he said the words that changed my life forever. The words that revealed the truth I had been too naive to see. He told her the baby was going to be perfect. Their baby. The child they had created together. The proof of their special connection. I stumbled backward. My legs felt weak. My vision went blurry. The room started spinning around me. I had to grab the wall to keep from falling down. Robert was the father. Not James. Not my youngest son. My husband. The man I had slept beside for 46 years. The father of my 4 children. The grandfather I thought was excited about new babies in the family. He was actually the father of those babies. I made it to the kitchen before I collapsed into a chair. My whole body was shaking. My heart was beating so fast I thought it might explode. I couldn't breathe properly. Couldn't think clearly. Couldn't process what I had just witnessed. Everything suddenly made sense. The phone calls. The private visits. The expensive gifts. The suspicious timing of 3 pregnancies. The guilty look in Robert's eyes when I told him the news. My daughters-in-law weren't carrying my grandchildren. They were carrying my husband's children. Robert's children. Half-siblings to my own sons. The betrayal was deeper than anything I could have imagined. Not just adultery. Not just lying. But creating children with the women my sons loved. Destroying our family from the inside out. Making a mockery of everything I believed about marriage and loyalty and trust. I sat in that kitchen for hours. Not moving. Not speaking. Just trying to understand how my life had become a nightmare. How the man I trusted most in the world had become a stranger. How my safe, secure family had become a web of lies and deception. When Robert finally came looking for me, I was still sitting at the kitchen table. Still staring at nothing. Still trying to figure out what to do next. He asked if I was feeling all right. Said I looked pale. Offered to make me some tea or call the doctor. His concern seemed genuine. His voice was gentle and caring. The same voice that had been whispering sweet words to Rebecca an hour earlier. I wanted to scream. Wanted to throw something. Wanted to demand answers and explanations and apologies. But instead I just nodded and said I had a headache. That I needed to rest. That night I lay in bed next to him pretending to sleep. Pretending everything was normal. Pretending I didn't know what I knew. But inside I was dying. Piece by piece. Bit by bit. The man sleeping beside me had destroyed everything I cared about. He had seduced my daughters-in-law. He had fathered their children. He had turned my sons into unknowing victims of his betrayal. And somehow he was going to let them raise his babies as their own. He was going to watch my sons love and care for children that weren't theirs. He was going to sit at family dinners and smile while his own sons played with their half-siblings. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. The calculation was terrifying. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a single mistake. This was a deliberate campaign of deception that had been going on for months, maybe years. I started piecing together the timeline. Sarah's Tuesday visits had started last summer. Lisa's Thursday appointments began in the fall. Rebecca's Saturday workshop lessons started right after New Year's. Robert had systematically seduced each of my daughters-in-law. One by one. Week by week. He had used his charm and authority and position as their father-in-law to manipulate them into relationships they never should have started. And now they were all pregnant. All carrying his children. All preparing to give birth to babies that would tear our family apart when the truth finally came out. Because it would come out. Secrets this big don't stay hidden forever. DNA doesn't lie. Children grow up to look like their real parents. Someday somehow my sons would learn the truth. And when they did, it would destroy them. Destroy their marriages. Destroy their trust in everyone they loved. Destroy the foundation of everything they believed about family and loyalty and love. I was the only one who knew the truth. The only one who could stop this disaster before it got worse. But I had no idea how to do it without destroying everything anyway. The days that followed my discovery were the darkest of my life. I moved through my daily routines like a ghost. Making meals I couldn't eat. Cleaning rooms that felt contaminated. Pretending to be the same woman I had been before I learned the truth. But everything had changed. Every surface in my house felt dirty. Every photograph on the mantel looked like evidence of lies. Every memory of family gatherings became tainted with the knowledge of what was really happening. I couldn't look at Robert without seeing his hands on Rebecca's stomach. Couldn't hear his voice without remembering his whispered promises to her. Couldn't sleep in our bed without imagining him planning his betrayals while I lay beside him unknowing. The shame was overwhelming. Not just his shame but mine too. How had I been so blind? How had I missed the signs that were probably obvious to everyone else? How had I failed so completely as a wife that my husband needed to find comfort with 3 other women? I started avoiding phone calls from friends and neighbors. Their cheerful congratulations about the pregnancies felt like daggers in my heart. They were so excited about the babies coming. So happy for our growing family. So envious of my good fortune. If only they knew the truth. If only they understood what those babies really represented. Not blessings but curses. Not joy but devastation. Not new life, but the death of everything I had built over 46 years of marriage. I began noticing things I had missed before. The way people's conversations stopped when I entered a room. The pitying looks from cashiers at the grocery store. The whispered comments behind my back at church. They knew. Some of them anyway. Maybe all of them. This town was small enough that secrets didn't stay secret for long. Especially secrets as scandalous as mine. My husband was having affairs with our daughters-in-law. My daughters-in-law were pregnant with his children. My sons were unknowingly preparing to raise their father's babies as their own. The humiliation was suffocating. I felt like I was wearing a sign around my neck advertising my failure as a woman. As a wife. As the matriarch of a family that was falling apart. I considered confronting Robert directly. Demanding explanations. Insisting he tell our sons the truth before the babies were born. But every time I worked up the courage I lost it again. What words could possibly capture the magnitude of his betrayal? What conversation could possibly fix what he had broken? What explanation could possibly justify what he had done to our family? Besides, confronting him would force me to make decisions I wasn't ready to make. Divorce at 74 years old? Starting over after a lifetime of depending on him? Living alone for the first time since I was 22? The practical considerations were terrifying. Robert controlled our finances. He made all the major decisions. He handled everything from taxes to insurance to home repairs. I had been a traditional wife for so long that I wasn't sure I could survive as a single woman. But staying meant accepting his betrayal. Accepting that our marriage was a lie. Accepting that I would spend the rest of my life pretending not to know what I knew. Living with a man who had destroyed everything I valued most. I started having panic attacks in the middle of the night. Waking up gasping for air. Heart racing. Sweating despite the cool temperature. The weight of my knowledge felt like it was crushing my chest. Robert would ask what was wrong. Offer to call a doctor. Bring me water and aspirin and worried attention. His concern felt genuine, But it also felt like another layer of deception. How could he care about my health while destroying my life? The worst part was watching my sons. David would call to share his excitement about becoming a father. Michael would stop by to ask for advice about preparing for a baby. James would bring Rebecca for dinner and beam with pride about his growing family. They were so happy, so innocent, so trusting. They had no idea their wives were carrying their father's children. No idea their father had seduced the women they loved. No idea their entire understanding of their family was built on lies. I wanted to protect them from the truth, but I also knew they deserved to know it. They were making plans based on false information, preparing for futures that were built on deception, loving children who weren't genetically theirs, but telling them would destroy them. Their marriages would end. Their relationships with their father would be over forever. Their children would grow up in broken homes. Their faith in love and family and trust would be shattered permanently. I was trapped between protecting them and protecting myself, between preserving their innocence and preserving my sanity, between keeping Robert's secrets and telling the truth that would devastate everyone I loved. The isolation was the hardest part. Having knowledge that I couldn't share with anyone. Carrying a burden that was too heavy for one person to bear. Smiling and nodding and pretending everything was fine when my world was collapsing around me. I had spent my entire adult life being part of a family. Being someone's wife and someone's mother and someone's mother-in-law. My identity was completely tied to my relationships with other people. Now those relationships were all poisoned. Contaminated by Robert's betrayal and my knowledge of it. I didn't know who I was anymore without the roles that had defined me for so long. All I knew was that I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. Someone had to know the truth. The secret was eating me alive from the inside out. But I still had no idea how to make any of it stop without destroying everyone I loved in the process. The collapse began on a Sunday in May. We were all gathered for our traditional family dinner. Sarah was showing off her growing belly. Lisa was glowing with pregnancy hormones. Rebecca looked radiant despite her morning sickness. My sons were attentive husbands, bringing their wives cushions, making sure they had enough to eat, talking excitedly about nurseries and baby names and their futures as fathers. Robert sat at the head of the table as always, playing the role of devoted patriarch, offering advice about parenting, sharing stories about when our boys were babies, acting like the proud grandfather-to-be. But I could see the truth behind his performance. The way his eyes lingered on each pregnant woman. The satisfied smile when he thought no one was looking. The possessive gesture when he helped Rebecca with her coat. I couldn't take it anymore. The charade was killing me. The lies were suffocating everyone at that table. The truth was demanding to be told whether I was ready or not. I stood up abruptly. My chair fell backward with a crash. Everyone turned to look at me. Their faces showed concern and confusion. They thought I was having some kind of medical emergency. In a way I was. An emotional emergency that had been building for 2 months. An explosion that I could no longer contain. The words came out in a rush. Angry words. Desperate words. Words that had been trapped inside me for too long. I told them everything I had discovered. Everything I had seen and heard and figured out. Robert's face went white. The girls started crying. My son sat frozen in shock. The perfect family dinner became a battlefield of accusations and denials and devastating revelations. David was the first to find his voice. He demanded to know if what I was saying was true. If his father had really been having an affair with Sarah. If the baby she was carrying was really his half-sibling instead of his child. Robert tried to deny everything. Called me crazy. Said I was having some kind of breakdown. Claimed I was imagining things that never happened. But Sarah's face gave away the truth. Her tears weren't tears of outrage or shock. They were tears of guilt and shame and regret. She couldn't meet David's eyes. Couldn't defend herself against my accusations. Michael stood up and demanded answers from Lisa. She broke down completely. Admitted everything through sobs that shook her whole body. Confessed that she had been seeing Robert for months. That the baby was his. That she was sorry but she couldn't help herself. James turned to Rebecca with a look of pure betrayal. She didn't even try to deny it. Just nodded and whispered that she was sorry. That she never meant for it to happen. That she loved him but she loved his father too. The room exploded into chaos. Shouting and crying and accusations flying in every direction. 46 years of family history destroyed in a matter of minutes. Relationships that had taken decades to build crumbling in real time. David grabbed Sarah's arm and dragged her toward the door. Told her to get out of his house and never come back. Said he never wanted to see her or her bastard child again. His words were cruel and final. Michael was even worse. He called Lisa names I had never heard him use before. Told her she was disgusting and pathetic and worthless. Said she had destroyed his life and he would make sure she paid for it. James didn't say anything to Rebecca. Just walked out of the house without looking back. Left her sitting at the dining room table crying and calling his name. Begging him to listen to her explanation. Then my sons turned on their father. The man who had taught them how to be men. How to treat women with respect. How to build families based on love and commitment and trust. They called him a monster. A predator. A sick old man who had destroyed everything they cared about. They said they never wanted to see him again. That he was dead to them. That he had forfeited his right to be their father. Robert tried to explain himself. Said he loved all of them. Said the affairs just happened. Said he never meant to hurt anyone. But his words sounded hollow and pathetic and completely inadequate. One by one my sons left the house. David first, then Michael, then James. They walked out of my life as quickly as they had walked into it 25, 27, 29 and 31 years ago. The daughters-in-law followed soon after. Sarah and Lisa left immediately. Rebecca lingered for a few minutes trying to apologize to me. Trying to explain how it had happened. But I couldn't listen to her excuses. Suddenly the house was empty except for Robert and me. The man I had spent my entire adult life loving. The father of my children. The grandfather of babies who would now grow up in broken families. We sat in silence for a long time. Looking at the ruins of our Sunday dinner. The overturned chairs and abandoned plates and shattered dreams scattered across the floor. Finally Robert spoke. He said he was sorry. That he never meant for me to find out. That he loved me and always had. That the other women meant nothing compared to our marriage. But it was too late for apologies. Too late for explanations. Too late to fix what he had broken beyond repair. Our family was gone. Our sons would never forgive us. Our grandchildren would grow up without knowing their real grandfather. Everything we had built together was destroyed. And it was all his fault. 3 months have passed since that terrible Sunday dinner. 3 months of living with the consequences of Robert's betrayal and my decision to reveal the truth. 3 months of learning what it means to lose everything that once defined me. My sons still won't speak to me. They blame me for keeping the secret as long as I did. They say I should have told them the moment I suspected something was wrong. They think I was protecting Robert instead of protecting them. Maybe they're right. Maybe I was a coward for not acting sooner. Maybe I should have confronted him the day I overheard him with Rebecca. Maybe I should have demanded the truth before 3 babies were conceived. But I was trying to protect everyone. Trying to preserve our family. Trying to find a way to fix the problem without destroying everything in the process. I see now that was impossible. Some things are too broken to be repaired. Robert moved out 2 weeks after the revelation. He's staying in a small apartment across town. He calls every few days to check on me. To see if I need anything. To ask if we can talk about reconciling. I listen to his voice through the phone and remember the man I married. The young banker with the charming smile and the promises of forever. That man seems like a stranger now. Someone I used to know but can no longer recognize. The babies have all been born now. 3 healthy children who will grow up knowing their real father destroyed their families before they were even old enough to understand what family means. David and Sarah divorced before their daughter was born. The little girl lives with Sarah now. I've never seen her. Never held her. Never even learned her name. Sarah moved back to her hometown with her parents. Michael and Lisa tried to work things out for a while. They went to counseling. Talked about forgiveness and second chances. But trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild. They separated last month. James filed for divorce the day after our family dinner. He couldn't even look at Rebecca's growing belly without seeing his father's betrayal. Their son was born 2 weeks ago. James hasn't visited the hospital. My grandsons and granddaughter will grow up without knowing me. Without knowing their uncles. Without understanding why their families fell apart before they were old enough to have memories. That might be for the best. Some truths are too painful to carry. Some knowledge is too heavy for small children to bear. Maybe they'll be happier not knowing why everyone they should love has decided to hate each other instead. The town gossips have moved on to newer scandals. Other families with other secrets to whisper about. But I still feel their eyes following me when I go to the grocery store. Still hear the conversations that stop when I walk into a room. I am the woman whose husband destroyed 3 marriages with his selfishness. The grandmother who will never know her grandchildren because of choices she didn't make but couldn't prevent. Some days I wonder if I should have kept the secret forever. Let my sons raise Robert's children as their own. Pretended not to know what I knew. Carried the burden alone until I died with it. But lies have a way of revealing themselves eventually. DNA tests and family resemblances and inherited traits that can't be hidden forever. The truth would have come out someday. Maybe it's better that it happened now, while the children are too young to remember the explosion. I've learned things about myself these past 3 months. Things I never wanted to know but needed to discover. I am stronger than I thought I was. More independent than I believed possible. Capable of surviving even when everything familiar has been stripped away. I've also learned about loneliness. Real loneliness. Not the temporary sadness of missing someone who's gone on a trip. But the permanent ache of losing everyone you love all at once. Of having your entire support system vanish in a single afternoon. But I am still here. Still breathing. Still getting up every morning and finding reasons to continue. That has to count for something. That has to be worth something in the grand calculation of a life well lived. I don't know what happens next. Whether my sons will ever forgive me. Whether I'll ever meet my grandchildren. Whether Robert and I will find a way to rebuild something from the wreckage of our marriage. All I know is that secrets destroy everything they touch. That trust, once broken, changes the shape of every relationship forever. That families are more fragile than we want to believe. But I also know that truth, however painful, is better than living a lie. That courage, however late it comes, is still courage. That survival, however difficult, is still victory. I am 75 years old. I have lost my husband, my sons, and my grandchildren. But I have not lost myself. I have not lost my dignity. I have not lost my belief that honesty, however devastating, is the only foundation worth building a life upon. If you are listening to this story, if you recognize pieces of your own family in my words, please learn from my mistakes. Don't wait to confront the secrets that are poisoning your relationships. Don't protect liars at the expense of truth tellers. Don't sacrifice your integrity to preserve other people's comfort. Some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. Some trust once broken can never be repaired. Some families once destroyed can never be put back together the way they were. But you can survive it. You can find strength you didn't know you had. You can build a new life from the ashes of the old one. I am living proof that even the worst betrayals don't have to be the end of your story. They can be the beginning of a different story. A harder story maybe, but an honest one. And sometimes, honesty is all we have left to hold on to when everything else has been taken away. My name is Margaret. I am 75 years old. This is my true story. And I am still here to tell it.